Hello. So today I'm going to continue working on the MiG 17 model. I got a book here about the MiG 15 and the MiG 17. This is a nice guide to painting these airplanes. And I'm basically going with the model in the box, but I'm trying to do a plane, a Russian plane, similar to this. But you can see there's many colorful ways to put together the MiG 17. So this was the old Hasegawa kit and the MiG 17 D and E Fresco. It says easiest to assemble, which it turned out that for the most part this wasn't bad to build. You saw the previous video when I was fighting with the fuselage, which was a little tricky to get that together. But I managed, and there is a bit of a seam here that I had to sand and fill a bit of it in with putty. Still got a little bit of silly putty on the window right now because I don't want to get my paint on the window. But overall, this wasn't bad. A few fiddly parts I had to mess with, but it came out a lot better than I thought, and I do think that your children would probably enjoy making one of these. I would say, other than lining up the fuselage, which is a little bit, as you saw previously, but that it worked out. And the other issue that might be frustrating for your kids, but was, again, not horrible, was getting these missiles and the missile launch pylons onto the plane. But there's an option without them, so you could do it either or. I added them because I thought it would add a little bit more color to the airplane, which, you know, kind of does. I didn't go with the weights, so it does kind of sit incorrectly on the table, but I can live with that. So I did find that the decals on that kit didn't really work, so I'm going to try something different today. I have some spare decals from another model. I'm going to see if these work. Hopefully they do. They look good. One of the things I noticed in the model building workshops at the Smith Hill Library that I've been running, a lot of kids don't seem to like doing decals, and I'm not really sure why. I think maybe they prefer the peel and apply stickers over decals, but a lot of them like to paint it and call it a day. I happen to like doing decals because I think that's what really makes the planes, or any model, really stand out. So I'm going to try to apply a couple of decals to this plane now and see how it goes. So let me cut one out here. I'm hoping these work out okay. You never really know with a decal sheet if it's going to cooperate or not. I mean, this one looks nice. I don't see any yellowing on it. I don't see any cracks or creases on the sheet because sometimes that'll make them break and kind of fall apart. A little dab of water there. I'm going to check this book again because I think there's an angle that these go on. Yeah, I don't think that's quite right. It's nice to have a reference book handy. I just happen to have one on this plane. Yeah, so it does show the wing position of the stars here. It's a camouflage version. I'm actually doing something like that. Because many times airplanes were just left in their natural metal colors for a number of different reasons. I mean, it's cheaper and faster to just get them out to the front line. There's also an argument, a couple arguments, as to whether the weight of the paint actually slowed the airplane down or not. Or if it, so that's another argument why they didn't bother. And there was thoughts too that airplanes tend to leave a contrail in the sky anyway, like a streak, so you could always, it's not like you're not going to see that streak, right? So there's different theories as to the use of camouflage, whether it is good or not. I think it tends to help more when they're on the ground to make them blend in with the terrain more so. But who knows? Lots of different debates, pros and cons about it. All right, let's see if I can position this star the way I want it to go. All right, no, these decals look pretty good. They look newer too, because the other model decals were probably the age of the kit, which is looking like it's from the 1970s. So, and sometimes you get lucky with decals that are that old that work fine, but it's always good to be prepared if they don't. This is a much newer set, so all right, let me double check that. It's on a weird angle, so I'll make sure I got the angle correct. And briefly, I'll talk a little bit about what this plane was, and let me see. No, that's kind of what it's supposed to look like. Okay, it looks kind of weird on the model, but yeah. So the star is supposed to point in the direction the way the wing's going. Let me try that again because it it does look strange. That's why I keep looking at it. No, that is the angle. All right. So there's one there. I'm going to put one on the tail just so you get the effect of how this is going to look. Then I'll try to figure out the numbers and all that afterwards. I don't know if I want to show you all of this process because I know we've already done a video on how to do decals. So, although for those of you who may have missed that, it's very simple. I'm cutting them out of the sheet. I'm dipping them into warm water here. About 30 seconds to a minute. Some decals need more convincing than that. Look at that. Reference, yeah. This is an interesting MiG 15 in the Acrobat, the air show scheme. But I'm just doing a very basic frontline fighter from the probably early 60s, I guess. So apparently this the MiG 17, which is an improved version of the MiG 15. According to this information sheet here, it showed up, what, in 1959, I believe? Yeah, 1959, so it was kind of a fighter plane that kind of lasted a long time in use. The MiG 15, which is a little different, kind of shocked the world when it showed up during the Korean War. It was quite the adversary, the MiG 15. And the 17 here turned out to be a problem for American pilots during the Vietnam War, as North Vietnam was equipped with a lot of these planes. Get the angle correct. So these were nimble, highly maneuverable dogfighting planes. They were armed with an array of cannon in the front And even though they were slower and a lot more low tech than some of the American combat planes that they were encountering, but the agility and maneuverability of these planes and the cannon tended to be a real threat to American planes of the time period. Okay, so that seems to give you an idea. I think that's angled well. So we're starting to get a look going here. There'll be a number on the front and some more stars underneath, and that's pretty much it for markings. So make sure it's lined up right. Looks good. So let me talk a bit more about the MiG-17. So like I said, it was a good dogfighting plane. It served in Vietnam. It served throughout all the different Middle East wars, the Arab-Israeli wars. Like here's an example of a Syrian plane from the 60s. Here's a Chinese fighter up here, MiG-15. This book's a nice book from the Planes and Pilots series. Again, a historian collection publication, which I really like their books. Because, you know, you get the brief history of the airplane, and then it goes, this one has an alphabetical arrangement of the different air forces that use these aircraft and the different markings and paint schemes. And as you can see, this plane, you know, Cambodia, this plane was used by many, many countries as China, and the many different paint schemes you have for China, Congo, Cuba, Czechoslovakia. It just goes on and on. All the countries that operated these, East Germany, and it's just endless, it seems. Iraq, North Korea. So it just goes on and on and on. Nigeria was there, Pakistan. So, you know, Poland. Did a model a couple of years ago. This is a Polish. It's a training version of the MiG-15. So that's a Polish one with a nice checkerboard emblems. So the jet aircraft kind of was developed during World War II, and the first operational fighter plane, this is an old model I built when I was younger. So it started with this plane here. This is the Messerschmitt 262, the Swallow. So this is the first operational jet fighter bomber in the world. And that showed up late in World War II, around 1944, 45. These showed up, and suddenly a whole new era arrived in aviation history, because they were working with piston engine propeller planes, and then suddenly this shows up, which is way faster than any of those. And speaking of MiG, so MiG is a abbreviation of the manufacturers, the design team that came up with this aircraft. I'm going to try my best here. I'm not good with Russian. Mikoyan Gurevich. So just shortened to MiG. And they started building planes during World War II. This is a really beat up old model I built as a kid. I still have it. That's a MiG-3, so with the propeller. So this is from 1941. So they started with planes like that. And then they really came to their own, you know, in the 1950s, developing jets like this one. You know, that's the 17. One thing that's fun about the 17 is it just looks like it's a fast plane. The way the delta wing and the, you know, the swept wing design, it just looks fast, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm kind of going out of order here, but all right. So the 262 was the first operational jet fighter in World War II, and the British were quickly behind with the Gloucester Meteor, which is this one here. So that showed up shortly after the Messerschmitt. So this is the Gloucester Meteor. It's got the cannon in the front, similar to the Messerschmitt. Italy had experimented with jet planes, and they have the Caproni design here. Again, from the 1940s, early 40s, this one. This was just an experimental plane. It never really went beyond like a couple of experimental models. Not really sure why Italy scrapped the idea, but they were early in the running of coming up with a jet fighter. And yeah, and then it goes on to history to these, and then of course it progresses into, you know, later in the 60s we start seeing the delta wing designs like this one, the Mirage, which is a French design jet, and this one happens to be in the Ecuador Air Force color. But anyhow, so that's kind of my message today on the jet planes and the different types of models we're doing, and I wanted you to see how the 17 was progressing, and that's where it is now. And I'll finish the decals, and I got a few more touch-ups I'm going to do with the paint, and that'll be it for the MiG 17. Well, I hope you learned something and had some fun watching me ramble this morning. Okay, so that's it for today, and I'll be starting up another project soon. All right, and I'll talk to you guys really soon. Bye now.